Wings of Fire, the Dragonet Prophecy. Chapter 8. Freezing water splashed over Clay's head. He woke up with a gasp as the rest of his body was plunged into the river. Strong talons gripped his shoulders, shoving him under the water. He thrashed, terrified, and the current nearly dragged him away. The other dragon yanked his head into the air and shouted, "Quit struggling, I'm saving you!" Clay went limp and let himself be shoved under again. He felt sticky poison washing from his talons, but although the pain lingered. As his panic died down, memory clicked on. He lunged back to the surface. "Tsunami!" he yelled, trying to wrap his wings around her, flapping and splashing in the dark. Her claws dug into the spines along his back. "Seriously, Clay, stop moving!" She whacked his tail back into the water with her own. "I don't know what this white stuff is, but it smells awful, and I think it's trying to dissolve your scales. You stay in the water until I get it done." She moved his claws to the rock and helped him hang on against the fierce current while she poured more water over his head. He strained his eyes trying to see her, or even a black shadow that might be her, but it was too dark. He clung to the feeling of her cold wet scales against his. She was really here. "How did you get free?" he asked through chattering teeth. They had to shout to be heard over the roaring waterfall. "Fire!" said Tsunami. "I realized if Kestrel's flame could merge those chains together, maybe more fire would break them apart. I knew I couldn't do it. She knew I couldn't do it. And as usual, she figured we wouldn't help each other because that's not the dragon's nature or whatever. It took Sunny and Starfire together to get the fire hot enough, but they blasted one of the links until it melted. And then I followed you as fast as I could." Clay rested his head on the rocks by his talons. It felt like the cracks between his scales were singing high-pitched arias of pain. "Well," he said, "as you can see, I'm doing great so far. I was just about to save the day." "You would have," Tsunami said. "I'm sure you've woken up soon and made it to the river on your own." She battered one of his wings lightly with hers. Clay wasn't sure of that at all. He wasn't about to add whining to the list of things wrong with him. "Did you see the glowworms?" he asked instead. "Kind of cool, right?" "Oh, I can beat that." A moment passed, and then Tsunami's stripes began to glow along her wings and tail. She even turned on the whirls of light along her snout. Dimly, the cave took shape around them. Clay had never been so happy to see anything in his life. "Thanks," he said. "It's kind of unfair. You guys get to see in the dark, And it's the rest of us who actually need glow-in-the-dark scales. Tsunami ducked her head in an odd, embarrassed way. Well, isn't that not meant to help us? She said. Clay stretched his leg and tail under the water. The grooves on his scales were gone, but the stinging was still there, battling the freezing numbness caused by the river. Really? He said, trying to take his mind off the pain. Then why do you glow? Well... He'd never seen Tsunami stammer over anything. Now he was really curious. Tell. You know you're doing that thing you do, she said, where you talk about something ridiculous so you don't have to deal about something serious. I am not, Clay protested. You're the one who's ducking the question. All right, fine, she said with a grimace. Glowing in the dark, Webb says, is to attract other seaweeds. That's how we choose our partners or whatever. She shoved his head under the water again. Now, aren't you sorry you asked? He was, a little bit. The idea of Tsunami leaving them for another seaweed with cold glowing scales made Clay feel extra blobby and drab. So we can't go up the rocks, he said. What do we do about that waterfall? He hoped she wouldn't ask whether his scales still hurt. He just had to tough it out until the pain went away. She grinned. We dive right in, she said. How high could we? And how many sharp rocks? Could there be in the bottom? He contorted. I'd like to see what we're jumping off first. All right, let's go check it out, she said. Releasing him and leaping into the water. The current whooshed her away, and he had to let go of the rocks to follow her quickly. Before the light of her scale disappeared. Tsunami, he called. There's no way she could hear him over the roaring waterfall, and an underwater boulder slammed into his belly, and he inhaled a mouthful of river. Choking and coughing, he paddled after the barely glow in the distance. Suddenly the glow vanished, and then he was plunged into darkness again. Tsunami! He roared. A heartbeat later, Clay felt air suddenly yawn wide in front of him. Some instinct kicked in, and she lashed out with his talons and tail. One of his claws caught a jagged spur rock, and then he flung his front talons around it, just as the rest of him flew out into space. He was dangling over the waterfall. He dug his claws into the rock and hung on for dear life, scrunching his eyes shut even though the darkness was still there. Poison ridged his skin, screaming with agony as he stretched below his scales. He couldn't bear to think of how far Tsunami might have fallen, and he could picture her broken body somewhere far below. Something whacked his foot. "Watch out, Clay!" Tsunami's voice teased. "It's really dangerous. You might stub a claw." Clay opened his eyes. The waterfall crashed below him, cascading into a foamy pile of bubbles only a short distance from his dangling back claws. Tsunami was splashing and somersaulting in the pool, flipping and waving at him with her tail. "Hang on tight," she cried. "Whatever you do, don't let go." "Ha ha ha," he said. He strewed the water below him, and then his tail cracked for the rocks, and then let himself drop. The waterfall gently battered on his head as he resurfaced. "You knew how short it was," he said. "You knew how short it was," he said. "Maybe," she said with a grin. "Alright, yes, I just got into the edge when I heard you yell, and then went back for you. Lucky. I'm not the type to suffer and die in silence," Clay said, but he couldn't help thinking, what would have happened if I hadn't cried out? If we had missed each other? "Come on, the rivers keep going this way," Tsunami said. Her webbed feet stooped through the river water, shielding her out in front of them. He followed her through the pool into another narrow channel with rocky banks on either side. But he crooked his head. His ears twitched. That can't be all the roaring, then. Is there more up ahead? There was a red echo in these caves. He couldn't tell if he was hearing the roar of the small waterfall or if there was something else. Tsunami suddenly spread her wings and spun to a halt, gazing up at the ceilings. "Do you see that?" Clay squinted into the darkness. Her luminescent scales didn't cast light that far. He couldn't even see the stalactites were probably up there. No, it was a bat. "It's a bat!" Tsunami excitedly slammed into the river with her tail, submerging Clay in a tidal wave of water. Clay came gasping for air. A bat? Why are we down? Why are we drowning me over a bat? Once a bat had bumped through the sky hole, it had flapped pathetically around the study cave until Tsunami begged the webs to catch it and let it free. At least he'd done it. But at least he'd done it when Sunny couldn't see him, because it must have come from. Oh, he flapped pathetically around the study cave until Sunny begged Dune to catch it and set it free. Clay was half convinced that Stone had eaten it instead, but at least he'd done it where Sunny couldn't see him. Because it must have come from somewhere, she said. Bats go outside to hunt, so if bats can get in and out, I'll bet we can too. We must be close. Bats are a lot smaller than we are, Clay pointed out, but Tsunami had already started swimming. He flexed his wings underwater, worried. The paint wasn't going away. It felt like tiny sharp teeth bagging all over him, under his scales. Look, Tsunami yelled from overhead. I see light. Clay beat his wings quickly, trying to catch up. It helped that the current was getting faster again. But then the roaring was getting louder too. He came around the bend of his river and saw a circle of silvery light in the distance. The dark outline of Tsunami's head, barreling towards it. Clay couldn't believe his eyes. It was moonlight, just like he'd seen through the sky hole. There really was a way out, and they had found it. He was speeding along now, barely using his legs to paddle, as the river whisked him towards light. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed through the cave, and Tsunami disappeared. Please be another joke. Please be another joke, Clay prayed, swimming fast as he could. The moonlit entrance yawned wide in front of him, and then, abruptly, he shot out into open space. The river plunged out of the cave and straight down to a tall, stiff cliff. Clay's wings flew open and he banked, catching the air before he fell. He was flying!